some of you may not realize that over the past decade, Colorado has really emerged as a global leader in making oil and gas production consistent with a long-term transition to a net zero carbon energy future. And regulatory professionals and the agencies where they work have really played a major role in this achievement. Colorado's approach to methane, for example, has been mirrored at the national level, and it has also heavily influenced the emerging global approach to this pressing climate challenge. And this is a really big deal, because if you can get fugitive methane emissions completely out of oil and gas supply chains globally, that's the climate equivalent of taking every car, every truck in the world, converting it to an electric vehicle and powering every single one of those vehicles on a zero carbon source of electricity. And you can do that much faster than fully electrifying the transportation sector, and you can do it at a much less cost, or a much lower cost. At the same time, Colorado has also been addressing other challenges to do with regulations and social acceptance and the social license to operate. So Colorado has recently restructured its regulatory framework to recognize that oil and gas technologies and oil and gas professionals can and will play a leading role in developing other net zero energy solutions, like advanced geothermal energy and carbon capture and sequestration. And the Centennial State has also made major breakthroughs in involving local governments and other communities much earlier and in a much more substantive way in energy permitting decisions. And the lessons learned here in Colorado can be applied to many of the permitting and social license issues that are highly relevant to the production of energy and critical minerals and the construction of vital infrastructure to the energy transition. So, having set the scene, we're joined here today by two of the regulatory professionals who are actually making this happen. Steph Shoup with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and Aaron Ray, who is the interim director of the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. Please, everyone, give these guys a warm welcome. First question to you, Steph. I'm wondering if you can give us a quick overview of Colorado's approach to methane mitigation since 2014 and how you've seen that reflected nationally and even internationally, and the kind of interest that it's been generating from outside of the state.
Absolutely. In Colorado, we have an ozone problem. Many of you here living in the North Front Range probably know a little bit about that. And so we have been working on this for quite a number of years, specific to oil and gas, because we have a lot of oil and gas development that is contributing to the ozone issue. And in 2014 was the first time that we took that ozone focus, but used that authority that was given to us to actually expand our focus beyond just volatile organic compounds and into the methane world. And so in 2014, we established the first requirement on oil and gas operators to reduce and capture methane emissions. And that was something that was seen a couple of years later in a rule that came out from EPA that mirrored a lot of the elements that we had put into place in 2014. And that's continued to evolve over the last many years, as in 2014 it was thought we can never do this. You know, we don't have the technology, we don't have the understanding of the engineering, we don't have a way to move forward in this realm. And what's happened is that the engineers have risen to the challenge. And there has been a tremendous growth in not just how to design control systems to reduce emissions, but how to design the systems from the ground up to reduce emissions. And that has been evident in Colorado and is actually now seen. So one thing that we're doing in Colorado now is we're using, again, new technology to better understand methane emissions from the air. So we're doing satellite monitoring, aerial monitoring, ground-based monitoring in Colorado that is showing us that our basins in Colorado are actually performing at a much better intensity, a much lower intensity, meaning fewer emissions for the amount of production than other basins in the US and other basins in the world. And what that means is that it's not just EPA that's looking to us. We are involved in subnational groups that include members from Canada, South America, Mexico. We have been solicited to talk to people from the Middle East, from Iraq. Actually, just yesterday, Aaron and I met with a contingent from Iraq asking us questions about the technologies that have been used to reduce emissions in Colorado. We have worked with the government of Argentina. They invited me to come down and talk to them about what kind of rules and requirements and the technology that has been used in Colorado. So this is something that has an international effect right now as we are getting a lot of attention for all of the work that we've done.
Thanks so much, Steph. Aaron, so folks in the audience might remember that last year, Governor Jared Polis, who spoke here yesterday, actually came to campus to sign a very important piece of legislation in terms of changing the way that not only oil and gas is regulated in Colorado, but the whole regulatory framework and the structure for doing so, as well as other sources of energy. Aaron, can you talk about why this change was significant and how the role of your regulatory agency has been broadened, and also, you know, Steph has already sort of foreshadowed some of this, but how much attention is being paid to what you're doing outside of Colorado?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Steph did a great job talking about the sort of evolution of how oil and gas, particularly with respect to air emissions, is regulated in Colorado, and that mirrors the evolution of the organization that I work for, which is now the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, but historically was Colorado's Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And in 2019, state legislation passed that changed the mission of that agency from fostering oil and gas development to regulating oil and gas development. And after that legislative change, the commission went through a really intense period of rulemaking to sort of redo all of our rules around oil and gas to make them stronger, to make them stricter, and including to reduce methane emissions. As Simon noted, that evolution continued in 2023 when the legislature renamed the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, because we were expanding our mission to regulate not just oil and gas, but also carbon sequestration, deep geothermal development, underground natural gas storage. And then last year, our mission was expanded again to provide non-regulatory technical support for renewable development, wind and solar. And so the mission of the ECMC is really now regulating energy development writ large in the state. And we need to do that because we know that we're going to need all of those sources, oil and gas with increasingly lower emissions production, but also carbon sequestration, renewables, geothermal. We're going to need all of those sources to meet our climate goals in the state, which include getting to net zero emissions by 2050. And so it's not going to be one or the other, it's going to be all of those things. And we need regulatory agencies that can support that development and make sure we're doing it in a way that reflects Colorado's values.
Great, thank you for that. So I'm going to take my last two questions to try to save us some time, and I'm going to sort of sandwich them together. My first question is about the way that issues of energy and environment often get portrayed in sort of the public square. You know, I'm a former journalist, or as I like to say, a recovering journalist, so I've spent a lot of time, you know, thinking about and working in the public square and how these issues are perceived. And oftentimes when people talk about an energy transition, it's framed as a zero-sum game, as in the energy economy we have today, the energy systems, the workforce, the infrastructure, the technologies will have to be completely set to one side and then totally replaced by the completely new things. And I'd like to get you guys to weigh in on whether you think that's an accurate, you know, perception I have a feeling I know what you're going to say already, but and also, since you are here at Mines, and since many other people have had an opportunity to pitch our students on coming to work for them, I wondered if you could say a few words about a career, or even spending part of your career working in regulation and public policy and public service, and why students here might want to consider that. Aaron, do you want to take that first?
Sure. To your point about the zero-sum game, I don't see it as a zero-sum game, and I'll give you a couple of examples why I don't. As we've been developing a regulatory framework for deep geothermal operations, for carbon sequestration, one of the things that's been fascinating is our industries that have been involved in oil and gas development have been at the forefront of interest in those areas, right? Many of the technologies in terms of downhole operations, drilling, those are the same kinds of technologies that will apply to geothermal, to carbon sequestration, and so the industries that have that expertise are also interested in taking on those new roles. I'll also note that there's lots of opportunity for really interesting innovation. So we have one operator here in Colorado that is interested in installing small-scale solar at more than 100 oil and gas sites in the state in order to power their production facilities. And so that reduces emissions. It can send renewable power back to the grid. That's a really interesting sort of co-location of those technologies. And that is true for workforce as well. The kinds of people that have been working in energy are going to continue to work in energy in new and really interesting ways. And that's true for us as regulators. We have a bunch of engineers and geologists, many of whom have come from Mines and other schools like it. And those skill sets are still going to be critical. The kinds of downhole engineering it takes to safely regulate an oil and gas well is the same expertise that it takes to regulate a geothermal well or a carbon sequestration well. And so I hope that students interested in those things will come to the state to do that work. And then we're looking for all sorts of new skill sets, air quality experts and reclamation specialists and legal and policy experts who are interested in all of these new energy technologies. And so I think working in a regulatory agency is a terrific opportunity to learn. It's dynamic. Steph mentioned we just spent yesterday talking to government officials and industry representatives from Iraq. That's never something I thought I would do when I started working in Colorado state government, but we get to do that kind of thing. And then the last thing I'll say is I've worked in industry, I've worked in academia, but most of my career has been in public service in the federal and state government, and it's been the most rewarding part of my career is helping to serve the people of Colorado and all of you. So I hope students will consider that and consider working for the state.
You're here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an engineer as well, both an undergraduate and master's degree in engineering, but what I did in my master's program was haul water from a dairy lagoon and inject it into underground irrigation systems, and that is nothing like what I do now. And so one thing I just want to emphasize is that the skills that you learn about problem solving and the experience that you get along the way as you learn more about systems and technological advances, and then you understand how the law and the regulation kind of overlaps that, as well as what other drivers are out there. Money is always a driver. Energy demand is always a driver. And so as you start to understand how all of those pieces kind of overlay, you see opportunity kind of everywhere. And the people that can solve this problem are the ones that understand the problem, and you can only really understand the problem if you're working in the problem. And therefore, I think that it's kind of limitless what we can do, and what's in front of us right now is an enormous challenge, and that's exciting. If you're the kind of person that sees opportunity here, there's a lot of it, and so go for it, please. Working with the state has been incredibly rewarding. It allows me to take the technical understanding and background that I have to better understand the information that I'm being told from operators about what's possible and what's not possible, and what the limitations are and why those are limitations, so I can craft better rules that are actually implementable. And that to me is incredibly important, because rules don't mean anything if they can't be implemented. If they can't achieve those emission reductions on the ground, then they're just a piece of paper. And so by having this knowledge and overlapping that, we are able to make rules and requirements that are showing results. And that's why we've been so successful here in Colorado.
Well, listen, both, that was a really powerful pitch. I hope the students were paying due attention to it. Please, everybody, let's thank our panelists. We'll hand it back to Morgan.